It being 6 o'clock, I am going to start the Finance Committee meeting for tonight. The first item on the agenda is always if anybody from the public wants to make any comments. I should say in advance that this is not a public hearing, so that we will be glad to hear any comments that anybody wants to make now during this initial session. But once we start our business meeting, unless we have specific questions to ask of a department manager or somebody else involved directly with the budgets or whatever we're doing tonight, we will not be taking any comments or questions from the public. So do I hear anybody from the public that wants to speak? Do you see anybody online that wants to say anything? Seeing none, I'm going to move on.
Oh, there's a hand over there.
Yes, sir.
Do I need to stand up?
Yes, you need to go to the podium.
Hi, my name's Ronnie. I live on 3 Rivers Drive in Kingston. I've attended the past couple school committee meetings, and I've been just kind of gathering what's been going on. I was unaware of the migrant issue, which is not an issue of mine. The main issue is the school and the budget, and someone said go to the finance committee meeting and tell them how you feel and what you think. I've been talking to a lot of my neighbors and a lot of different people in town, and it's just very concerning to me that they're gonna cut the school budget at all. I know you were at the last couple meetings, and I moved to Kingston. I have 4 kids because of the great school systems, and to hear now that they're gonna cut the budget is just very concerning to me. I understand in 2017, the tax rate was 17%, I believe, and now it is at 12%. And I know nobody wants to hear raise the taxes. Even to come out of my mouth is like weird to say. I don't want to pay more, but to me, the schools are extremely important. And I think that it's something that a lot of people agree with to fix the issue, because I'm not an educated person, I'm not a smart person at all, but every meeting that I went to, my head was spinning, and I heard so many numbers, and we're gonna pull money from here, pull money from there, do this and that, and the bottom line to me was there's not enough money. And how do we get that money as a town? Raise the taxes. One thing that I saw in another town, and it seems like it's a crisis everywhere with the migrants. I don't have a problem with them being here. I'm all for helping people, but it's kind of like a perfect storm. They're in the schools and they're taking a lot of the help from the kids, and we're also gonna cut the budget. I just don't have a full understanding of a lot of it. I know that the hotels pay a hotel tax to the town, and now we don't get that. I'm wondering, is the state gonna reimburse us for something like that? Obviously, it doesn't need to be answered now, but it's something me and I know other residents would like to know. And I know I spoke with Kathy Lenatra extensively about it. And I believe she said it's being worked on, but it's a difficult situation dealing with the state, and I understand everyone's doing the best they can. That was pretty much the main stuff. I know I heard all this stuff about free cash, and I know that that there's new trucks needed, that it's gonna be a major expense, and that's extremely important to keep our roads safe. I just think that the kids' education is more important as well, and if there's free cash, can we use that and raise the taxes or figure out a number of different ways? I have a number of ideas myself. I already went and met with Dr. Whipple and have talked to other people. The thing that I can say is people in the community are more than willing to help. It doesn't need to just be town administrators and school administrators. At the last meeting, Dr. Whipple was asked to look at her, any cuts she could make more. And like, I was insulted. She had worked on it for weeks, and she was asking to look at it again, you know, to see if you can save any more money or anywhere else. And I have a bunch of notes and stuff written down. I'm not really good at this. I'm just very concerned, and I know a lot of people are.
Okay, I think we hear your concerns, and I think as you will see us talking about the situation tonight, you'll get more specifics, and we'll go from there. So thank you for coming.
Is
and
that going to
giving-
be an option, like raising the taxes, or is that just going to be pushed to the wayside? I'd like to know how to push
The
that
taxes
forward.
in Kingston are raised almost every year, and it's a matter of how much they're raised. We try to keep the tax increase at a reasonable amount, and that's why I don't want to get into the school budget yet, but I will tell you that the requested school budgets for education across the town this year is 10.3%, which is a high number. Last year, it was over 7%, and we provided $650,000 at the town meeting that really got the increase to about 9%. And it's just that as a real estate taxpayers in Kingston cannot pay those kind of increases every year. You're almost automatically going to get a 3 to 4% increase in your real estate taxes every year. And so what we're trying to do is manage that rate of increases. But anyhow, thank you for speaking up.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
The next item that we had on the agenda was the meeting minutes. We have so many other things on the agenda for tonight, I've deferred that until our next meeting. The next thing that I want to do is a little bit out of the planned situation here, but we have a new police chief here in town, and he has been looking at things in the police department for 3 or 4 months prior to actually coming on board. So he had a meeting with me to discuss some needs that the police department has. So I've invited him to say a few words here to us tonight to give the whole Finance Committee the opportunity to hear what he has to say and some of the plans. Chief? For those who don't know, his name is Brian Holmes, and he's just started here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, honorable members. I'd like to thank you for meeting with me today, Mr. Chairman, and I am doing this at a very terrible time. I recognize that. You have a looming crisis with the school system. The chair indicated that I had started looking at Kingston Police Department as early as January. I felt I had an obligation to learn as much as I possibly could about the department and where the needs were. Just a little bit about me. As the chair indicated, my name is Brian Holmes. I'm your new police chief. 27 years of law enforcement experience, left at the executive level, and here I am. And I've made a commitment to take the men and women of the Kingston Police Department and leave them better than I found them, and some of them are here with me tonight. It's my new law enforcement family. So I'm married to an educator. I recognize the needs of the education system. I also recognize that in order to educate, there are 3 pathways into the brain. That is seeing, hearing, and doing. My wife made 2 fantastic students out of both of my children, so I'm not dismissive of the needs of your education system to the least. The request that I made was drafted on Monday. I had a lot of people saying to me, why are you coming in on a paid holiday? And I said, well, it's my first day, and I've made an assessment of what I think we need. I met with my assistant. She also came in on a paid holiday. And what we drafted on Monday was submitted to the town administrator on Tuesday. Mr. Chair, did you give a copy of the request?
I have not yet, no.
Okay. In a nutshell, it's a request upwards of $500,000. I know that sounds big. It is big, but I want to talk a little bit about it. We submitted the draft to the town administrator on Tuesday, and myself, the town administrator, my assistant, Lieutenant Kelly, we met with the chair of the selectmen early in this afternoon, and we went over the request, and we talked about the challenge of the timeliness, so I understand that issue very well. There's a gentleman in the audience who has been an employee of the town for over 3 decades. He's a police officer. You see him zipping around town on a motorcycle on occasion, and he told me early on that there has not been a change in the staffing levels of the Kingston Police Department in over 3 decades, close to 35 years. The responsibilities of the men and women on the job, they've changed based on the changing needs of the town. We have school resource officer positions now. We have 1 full-time, and then we have 2 part-timers at the different schools in town. Obviously, everybody knows about the migrant shelter and the demand that that's placed on services for the Kingston Police Department. We haven't changed with it. We have not changed with the needs. The top ticket items, I just mentioned to them the crisis, but we cannot dismiss the issues of mental health and substance abuse that are having an impact on the domestic violence and the increase of calls that we've responded to. I'll give you some brief statistics. I know that you want backup data when you have a request of this magnitude. I do have some numbers that I'll present tonight, and I'll try to be as brief as I can because I know you have a lot of business. We do not have a court prosecutor. The role of a court prosecutor in any police agency is to serve as a liaison between the Plymouth County District Attorney's Office and the Kingston Police Department for the prosecution of cases. What do we want out of these cases? What's our role? What are we looking to do? It's an ad hoc position. There's no continuity, and that lack of continuity creates an instability in the prosecutorial longevity of our cases. It should be a dedicated position because also in the detective unit, there is the ad hoc public records request access officer's responsibilities, meaning when somebody makes a public records request, a detective has to leave what they're doing and make that request. So one of the things that's included in my large request is to backfill that position. In the interview process to select the next Kingston Police Chief, I kept hearing recurring themes. This community wants a traffic enforcement officer. This community wants outreach and engagement from the members of its police department. The police need to be understood, and we can't do that unless we're engaged in outreach opportunities with the community. I said in my acceptance speech that the police are the public are the police. So we need to be able to know what the needs of the community is, and we need to be able to interact with them on a more frequent and fervent basis. This department is in dramatic need of growth. So here I have a request that I've submitted to the chair, and I'd be happy to ask that you receive copies of it. Ordinarily, the process would be that I'd be involved in the budgetary process. Time prohibited me from being involved in the budgetary process. I would be more than happy if I were involved in that process back then, which probably started in the fall, to provide backup data, to provide numbers, to provide statistics. And we've thrown together some numbers that I will get to in a minute, but I understand that that is what a finance committee would want to either recommend for or against ahead of town meeting. So I recognize that we're short in that regard. To get a police officer on the street, boots on the ground, is 18 months minimum. You have the requisition of a civil service list. You want to do a background check that is very thorough. You don't want to have a 32-year mistake, or in the case of the younger generation, 37 years to get to maximum retirement. You have a medical, you have a psychological, you have a 6-month police academy, and then you have a field training period, which is probably in the order of about 2 months before the officer is allowed to get out on their own. So to get a police officer on the street, unless we're taking a lateral transfer from another department, it takes about 18 months, sometimes more, sometimes less, and it depends on the availability of police academy seats. How did we get to where we are right now? It's been 35 years of really not increasing the manpower at all in the police department, and then along came COVID. So what you have is a police department that's doing its very minimum police academy training and annual in-service online on shift. Now, I know that you've been there where you're sitting in front of a computer because you've got to do some sort of mandatory training. It's ineffective. We need our officers back at the police academy in the classroom to get to those 3 pathways: hearing, seeing, and doing. And it's not happening right now because it's just been left the way that it has been since COVID happened. That's a huge concern for me. There is a red letter vicarious liability issue when it comes to police training. A municipality, a police chief, a shift supervisor can be sued for a lack of training. There's a dramatic need for training in the areas of, I have a whole lot of things listed in my request for funds, but incident command systems that we've had since 9/11. We get some at the police academy. How to manage a critical incident, critical incident stress management, just to name a few. Leadership development, internal affairs, all these types of things that members of the command staff do not have, they're going to need. In short, the request is something that I've just looked at to show something that is a large number, and I know the timeliness of this is a challenge. Just want to give you a couple of quick statistics and then I'll wrap up. The police budget in 2019 represented 6.8% of the overall town's budget. Police department budget in the 2020 fiscal year represented 9.6% of the overall budget. And then from 20 to 21, it dropped 2% to 7.05%. And then 21 to 22, it went down to 6.61%. And then in fiscal 23, back up to 7.1%. So there's been an incremental, an incline and then a decline in terms of statistics. In terms of the overall calls for service that we're seeing an increase in, from 2021 to 2023, motor vehicle stops, officer-initiated activities went from 12,923 calls to 14,677, and that is a 13.5% increase in our activity. The overall calls for service had an 8.5% increase between 21 and 23 at 9,080 to a jump to 9,856. Calls to a certain location, I'm just trying to be polite here. It's an inn. They jumped from 144 in 2021 to 235, which is a 63.2% increase in calls for service, which is a strain on the personnel. And then another one, there was 0 in 2021 that did not exist at all, and it went to 270 calls for service. So there's more here, and I know that you have a lot of business, so I'm going to cut it short there, and I'm just going to say in closing that short of any action here tonight by this honorable board or the selectmen over the next few days, what you will likely see is a warrant article that's submitted for town meeting for a request of transfer or appropriation of funds for something. What we're asking for in the request that I gave the chair is 3 patrol officers and 1 dispatcher, among other things, but those are the biggest ticket items. So with the chair's permission, I'll answer any questions, or if you're all set and you don't need to hear anything else from me, I will simply sit down.
Does anybody have any specific questions? Go ahead, Derek.
Yeah, thank you for coming and speaking with us. I'm not sure if you're aware, and I'll tell you, when I hear about additional requests for funding from the police department right now, given what the town is looking at from a financial situation, I'm drawn to recent media reports indicating some very high salaries that individuals are collecting through the use of overtime. And that raises a red flag to me. We have a sergeant who is earning 3 times the median wage that position has. That puts an ongoing burden on the city, or on the town rather, for that. So, I would just like to hear if that's something that's, and I know you're new on the job, and this is obviously something that you have to get your hands around, but, when I hear about the budget concerns, you have 5% of your salary going to one individual, or 5% of your budget going to one individual, actually a little bit higher, if my math is correct on that.
That's a fair question, and I question the accuracy of 5% of the budget going exclusively to overtime.
I mean, I can tell you the individual made $280,000. Your budget last year was, or the budget that we're appropriating for this year, not even if we're going by last year, the budget last year was $4.3 million. So we're looking at, that's almost 6% if I'm doing the math right in my head.
I understand and recognize the question. It's a fair question, but again, my question back to you is, did that come all from the budget, or was there a portion of that was coming from private paid details?
See, and that's not information that I have, but I would still argue that a budget that an individual getting paid more than an investment banker in New York City in a town like Kingston might be something that we want to look at.
I'm happy to look at that further on down the road. That's not where we are right now, but I'd ask that you recognize my assistant.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I could, you gotta go for the mic. So if while the assistant's going up, I'd like to just try to identify for the FinCom members, the lion's share of that overtime money that was paid you know, the base salary was probably about $90,000, give or take. The rest of that, some of it would come from overtime opportunities that he has the right to fill if he chooses to do that. But I would suggest to you that $150,000 or more is coming from private details that are being paid for by outside companies and have no impact whatsoever on the budget or.
Does that impact our pension obligations?
No, it does not.
Only base salary. Do I have to state who I am?
No, that's
I'm
fine.
Laura from the police department. I'm the admin assistant. Keith is absolutely correct what he's stating. Majority of that individual's salary is for detail work, and just want to also say that the town benefits from when he does detail work, because we receive a 10% administration fee on top of anything that's billed.
Thank you.
You can say.
Any other questions or comments from members? Elaine?
If I could, and I just want to support what Laura and Keith said. I've done the police budget for many, many years, and the detail money is where the bulk of it comes from, and it's from private, you know, the utility companies and things like that. In addition to that, the overtime is because there's not enough staff. They have to fill shifts and everything else. So from that perspective, their salaries are in line, if not average or a little bit less than surrounding towns. So it's all the extras that make it look inflated when it really isn't.
Yeah, we're still on the, just one more statement. Elaine, I'm just going to go on about the salary study, that Kingston police officers are still on the lower end of the median salaries of comparable towns in our area.
And Kyle, we going to talk about this as a board, or how do you want to handle this?
My plan was to say that we probably don't have time to go into much detail here, and we are meeting jointly with the selectmen next week. So I would hand out this request to all members, and we could discuss it further at the meeting next week and take a vote if we wanted to make any adjustments to the budget. But if you would prefer to, you know, discuss it more in detail tonight and take a formal vote, whether we want to reopen the budget, I'm okay to do that, too.
No, I'm fine with your approach. I was just going to make a couple more comments if we weren't going to vote on it tonight.
Go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say that $500,000 increase over 35 years, I think, is very reasonable. As an individual, last year we hired 4 firefighters, so it's the equivalent from a money perspective. But then I will end that I am a member of the Finance Committee, and if you see tonight, I'm looking for cuts myself, so, but I full-heartedly support, and hopefully if it doesn't make this round, maybe a fall town meeting or something like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
One
Okay.
question, and this might be for Carol. Carol, where is that revenue from those details reflected in our packet? I don't see that in the local receipts.
So it's not in your local receipts at all. It's a separate fund that the police details are paid out of, and as the money comes back in, the money's deposited back into. So it is not part of the general fund police department operating budget. It's not anything that the FinCom is responsible or required for voting on. It's a self-supporting fund that is supposed to break even, maybe make a little bit of money. As Laura mentioned, we get a 10% surcharge on every detail that's filled.
And where's that reflected?
That's reflected in that police detail fund as well.
Okay. So
there's
that
no-
revenue is, that's not recognized at all?
The expense and the revenue are not recognized at all.
Okay.
But they basically offset. There's as I mentioned, there's a 10% surcharge that goes to that detail fund. But again, it's a service that the police officers of Kingston provide as a safety responsibility for companies that are working in the public way to make sure that the workers that are working for the company that's hired to detail and the public and the motoring public are all safe as they move around. But there is no cost at all to the taxpayers for that whatsoever, either current or in retirement.
Okay, if that's the only comments here, thank you, Chief, for coming in, and we will definitely be looking at this request that you made in more detail, and we'll be talking about it, I'm sure, at the joint meeting next week with the selectmen, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, honorable members as well. I'll make myself available if I have to meet with you. Mr. Hickey's got my number. If I need to meet with a small group of you in such a way that it's within the confines of open meeting, happy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next thing I'd like to do is the selectmen voted some items last week, adjustments to the budget. So I'd like to see if we could go through those items rather rapidly here, and so that we would be back in sync with what Carol is producing as the status of where we are with the budget. And I don't have, it's actually one of the last pages on the handout that Keith sent out to us all, saying what the committee, the selectmen were doing. But let me just read it to you. The first thing they did was they took out of the selectmen's budget $75,000 for a procurement officer position. So we have voted that $75,000 as part of the budget. So what I'm looking for now is, are we comfortable in voting to take it out so that we'll be in the same position as the selectmen are?
I am. So I'll make a motion.
We're okay with saving 75,000?
Well, there are offsets, so.
Yes.
And along with that, they put in $10,000 additional for part-time and overtime clerical support. So the net change to the selectmen's budget was a reduction of $65,000.
Can I just ask what $10,000 worth of overtime is for?
I believe it's a combination of overtime and/or part-time support, but our HR director here will be glad to answer that.
Hi, Tina Betty. So my conversations with Keith, that amount was overtime wages for additional work that would need to be done on the administration of the program of procurement, making copies, mailing things along those lines. So that's where that dollar amount. Oh, sorry. So that's where that dollar amount would come from. Talking about the 10,000 for overtime related to procurement.
I'm sorry for stepping away. I'm asking for the $10,000 because we've eliminated a position in my office. There are times during the year where the workload is significant, and I can utilize the existing staff to do some of the work that may have been done in the past by the additional staffing that we had. If I can bring if I bring up a part-time person, I'm not sure what they call them, a clerical pool employee once in a while, they can make copies for town meeting, for example, coming up. They can help out with stuff going on during open enrollment for insurances. It's really a number that I'm just looking to backfill what I can when I desperately need to have another set of hands in there. That's what that request is for.
Does that equate to a number of hours? Because how many?
It does. So I took. I have to offer the work. Correct me if I'm wrong. To the KTU clerical union first. If they have a person who's off-duty and has the ability to do that work, I'm paying them an overtime rate. So it was about 6 hours a week is what that $10 equates to, at a rate that frankly is worst-case scenario, where it, and I don't mean to say it that way, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to the union, it's at a union wage. If I'm unable to fill that position with a union employee, we can bring a clerical pool person in at a regular hourly rate that's less than the overtime rate of the union.
Thank you.
Can I
Sure.
just fill in some blanks?
What?
Can I fill in some blanks?
I'm sure there are a number of them.
Does,
So, oh, me, do you not
Go
want?
ahead.
Okay. So, when there's additional work in the Board of Selectmen's office, depending on the nature of the work, KTU may or may not be eligible for that, just because of confidential reasons and things along those lines. There is an administrative assistant already in the Board of Selectmen's office that's under wage and personnel, which is an hourly position. So that might lead to an overtime rate for that position, as well as clerical pool, which is also a wage and personnel position.
okay, any other comments or questions from the Finance Committee? I'd like to move these two items separately. So can I have a motion for the $75,000 reduction to the Selectmen's budget for the procurement officer? I'm not worried about the account numbers because I'm sure Carol's right on top of that.
Do we need the bottom line numbers that we're reducing it to?
No.
I move for the reduction of $75,000 for the procurement officer from the budget of the selectmen.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All abstained? $75,000, we recommend the reduction. The other one is a motion for the $10,000 increase to the budget for the part-time, overtime clerical support.
I make a motion that we increase the budget by $10,000 for clerical support.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
Oppose, and if I may, I'm going to be asking for a reduction in the budget overall, so for me to support an individual increase
Okay,
would be kind of,
so that's a nay.
that's a nay.
Okay, so 5 to 1 recommends approval of the $10,000. The next four items all involve IT. The first one, the administration is proposing to do away with the IT manager position and outsource it to an IT vendor. The IT management position would result in a reduction to the budget of $108,247. The outsourcing to a vendor would result in a cost of $111,000. Does anybody want to discuss these two items?
I just have a question on, are there any benefit savings that come along with this?
Yes. And I apologize. I didn't include those, and I apologize for that, but if Tina knows what they are, we'd be happy to make a further reduction to reflect the savings from eliminating an employee.
So we have an employee in the position, a full-time employee position now. If we were to just straightforward replace that position, looking at that salary sounds about right, but we would be spending anywhere between, I think it's 22 and 33,000 for benefits as our portion, even if we were able to get the person in at a lower salary, but it's likely at a higher salary. If the person that's in the position were to remain, we would be paying that amount because they do take benefits
So
today.
I guess if I could, just to clarify, I think the question was, does the current employee take health insurance?
Yes,
And so we could probably reduce
yes,
the health insurance line item by the net cost to the town of Kingston.
right.
I think is
That
what,
was my question, thank you.
I'm sorry. So I don't know if you've got this off the top of your head, Tina, or you have a pretty good idea of what the net cost is of the town health insurance after the employee contribution that we could potentially reduce that health insurance line by?
So, I just happen to have the rates right here. So if someone wants to do the math, if you wanted to do roughly 500 times 25, or 24, sorry.
12K.
Yeah, 11, 12K.
Well, it's actually, why don't you do 600 times, times the 24?
14.4.
I certainly understand what we're trying to do. Kyle Pike, being the practical guy, comment is that the total medical insurance budget for the town is what, $3.5 million per year? And if we really think that we can, are accurate to $15,000 or less, good for us. But in order to make the point, I am more than willing to consider reducing the $108,247 plus additional for the medical insurance. Does the Finance Committee believe we should be doing that?
I think we'd just be surprised when free cash is higher.
All right. So what do you want to add to the 108,000?
What did you say, Mike?
14, let's say 122, keep
Okay.
the number around. All right, I'll move the Finance Committee concur in the Selectmen's recommendation to reduce the IT budget by $122,000, reflecting the loss of a position at $108,000 and health insurance benefits at $14,000.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passes 6-0. The next one is $111,000 for the IT vendor. Can I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. The reduction for the employee benefits needs to be in the employee benefits. We can't just reduce IT for that.
Understand. So we will revise our numbers.
Friendly amendment to have that amount taken out of employee benefits.
All in favor, or do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Done.
Thank you.
111,000 increase to the budget for outsourcing to an IT vendor.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
Is this a multi-year contract, or is this just a one-year?
It's a one-year contract. They're willing to do a multi-year. We wanted to do, frankly, an annual contract just to make sure that things went as well as we expect them to go. It's a vendor that we've used as a company who supports our current IT director, and has provided assistance and support for installing hardware in our network, the fiber that's connected between the buildings now through a grant that we received. So we feel very strongly about the vendor we're using. It's going to come in and be seamless, but it is just a one-year contract, and there is no cost savings if we were looking to go for a multi-year contract.
And is there, the scope of work, do you anticipate there could be anything outside the scope of work that would cost additional to the 111,000?
There's a chance of that, but as I mentioned, they're familiar with what we have here. They are going to basically step into the role of the IT manager, and they're available and on call 24/7 for any needs that we have. A lot of the work that can be done remotely, and they intend to do that to maintain our servers and things of that nature. If there was a specific task that we asked them to do that was way outside of the scope, it would have to be part of the project cost of that project to seek the funding.
So as we've utilized them in the past, did we have like a contracted amount of money that we paid towards them?
We didn't. They were basically on call, so to speak, and they provided support to us whenever the IT manager felt there was a need for support. We have gone out to bid. We've gotten prices from a couple of companies and asked a third that we haven't heard back from. Both of the prices we received were within $700 of each other, but because of the relationship we already have and the knowledge that this firm provides or brings to the table, we feel as though it's going to be a very, very positive experience moving forward with the outsourcing of the IT manager.
I'm just wondering if there's any savings involved as far as we used to pay them to do.
Well, sure. So there's money in the IT budget now, some outside service money that's in the IT budget now, that if we do have a project that's outside the scope, it will be funded for that. A lot of the work that they did, for example, they helped us with the design and installation of the fiber network between all the buildings. That was on a grant that was paid for, the cost for their services was paid for through that grant money. So there's a small amount of money in the IT budget for outside services that they provided to us in the past that we'll continue to potentially need if there's another project outside of the normal scope of their work that we would have to have completed that we wouldn't have any other funding sources for.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Am I understanding right that the net effect of this is about $11,000 total? Am I doing that right?
So far, yes.
Okay.
Couple more.
I got you.
But in our favor.
I'll move that the Finance Committee recommend acceptance of the $111,000 as a cost in the IT department for outsourcing to a vendor.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 6-0. There are two other minor or smaller items also in the IT department. $10,000 for a firewall for I assume the new fiber network that we've installed or are installing, and $3,000 for dual remote authentication system. These were items added to the IT budget. Does anybody want any more information concerning either one of them?
The firewall that money is the ongoing payment for what we just approved the emergency fund transfer for.
Yes, sir.
correct? Okay. I'll move that the finance committee accept the $13,000 for the firewall and the dual remote authentication systems for the IT budget.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 6-0. So Carol, I believe that gets us up with the adjustment items that have gone through the budget in the last month or so.
Yes, with the addition of the employee benefit decrease.
Right. So that helps my bottom line. All right, I think that takes care of the housekeeping for that item. The next thing I'd like to do is start going through the items in the town meeting warrant that we did not do. You've all got a new package. Try not to get it mixed up because Rhonda has done a good job of trying to put support behind the items that we'll be talking about tonight, where we had requested additional support. So the first one that I believe we need to vote is Article 3, supplementing the town departmental budgets for this current fiscal year. The Veterans Department was looking for $35,000 where their activity has increased significantly. The thing to remember about the $35,000 is 75% of it is reimbursed to the town via the Veterans Administration. The fire department was asking for $50,000 for overtime. We talked briefly about that. The next page gives the fire chief's comments on why that's a reasonable request. Does anybody have any questions about either one of these items?
Is that $50,000 already being factored into the calculations about planned expenditures of free cash?
Yes.
Okay.
You can see down here, transfer from free cash
Yep, right, understood.
on the
Okay.
draft.
All right, I will move the Finance Committee recommend approval of Article 3.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Aye. I'm opposing it because I prefer to see less being budgeted this way and more coming out of adjustments when we have some excess cash left over in the various departments. So that is a 5-to-1 vote in favor of. The next item is the full budget, Article 6, including the schools, which we'll be discussing later. I want to skip over that and move through some of these other ones that I think will be much quicker. So I believe the next one is Article 11, the revolving funds. The only thing of significance here is increasing the Recreation Department's revolving fund balance from $500,000 to $700,000. And remember that these are funds where the cash goes in from the revenue side and the expenses offsets it. So the Recreation Director is saying that there's a lot more activity in the fund with more programs, et cetera.
Mr. Chair? Just so, if I could, the Recreation Director's out of town, couldn't be here this evening, but, you know, in discussing the situation with her, she was under the impression that in a past town meeting, the amount of money that was allotted as part of the approval of the warrant article for revolving funds for the Recreation Department was $600,000, not $500,000. So you might be seeing, there's a good chance, I think, that you'll be seeing the Recreation Director coming in front of the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen seeking a FY24 increase in the allotment of the revolving fund from $500,000 to $600,000 in fiscal '24. So while it looks like it's a $200,000 adjustment, it's in her recollection, a $100,000 adjustment. So I just want to make you aware that the
Thank you for that information.
state law allows for the Board of Selectmen and the FinCom to increase a revolving loan, or excuse me, a revolving fund amount for the fiscal year that you're in without having to go to town meeting.
I personally am going to vote against this article. That I have said before, I'm not excited about the whole concept of the revolving funds that has less visibility than things that go through the budget, and increasing another, whether it's 100,000 or 200,000, I'm not in favor of it, but I welcome any other comments here before we vote.
Can we vote these by fund?
Yes. In fact, we should. Good point.
Okay. All right. I will start, and I'm going to save the recreation one for last. I move the Finance Committee recommend approval of the portion of Article 11 related to Inspectional Services Revolving Fund, approved total expenditure in the amount of $150,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All in favor.
I move the Finance Committee recommend favorable action on the portion of Article 11 related to Senior Center Programs Revolving Fund, approved total expenditures in the amount of $50,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All not in favor? 100%. Next one.
I move the Finance Committee recommend favorable action on the line of Article 11 related to Adams Center Programs, approved total expenditures in the amount of $50,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 600.
I move the Finance Committee recommend favorable action on the line of Article 11 related to the Conservation Fund revolving fund, approved total expenditures in the amount of $15,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I move the Finance Committee recommend favorable action on the line of Article 11 related to the Wetlands Protection Fund revolving fund, approved total expenditures in the amount of $15,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I move the
Opposed? 600.
I move the Finance Committee recommend favorable action on the Recreation Programs Revolving Fund within Article 11, approved total expenditures in the amount of $700,000.
Second for discussion, if I call, Keith,
Yes, ma'am.
when is the, Sue Woodworth gonna come before and ask for the 600,000?
She's back in a couple of weeks. I would suspect she'll be coming in the first meeting in May for the Board of Selectmen, and then whenever the meeting is in May for the Finance Committee.
Okay, so probably the week of town meeting, she'll ask for the 600,000. And then that Saturday, she'll ask for 7. Okay.
There are, and again, if I could speak for Sue, there are increased programs that continue to be offered. This is obviously a revolving fund, so whatever money is being collected is being spent is also being collected. So there's no impact on the taxpayer. I certainly understand and respect the concern about having this program be off budget. But if the concern I have is if there's a reduction from the $700,000 request, it's been dropped from $750 to $700 for tonight, you're potentially going to be eliminating recreation programs for the community. And I just make sure you're aware of that, and you can vote based on your feelings. Thank you.
Did we have a second?
Yeah, I seconded it.
All in favor of the 700,000?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. 5-1. The next one is the capital equipment, Article 19. I see the chair of the capital planning committee is here to give us a brief explanation.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. How brief would you like it to be, Carl? Can we just skip right to the vote?
No, you use your judgment.
We could be here a while. Okay. The Capital Planning Committee has moved favorable action on a level services capital improvement plan for fiscal year +25. There is zero fat on this year's capital plan. By that I mean there's no expansion of the capital footprint. There's nothing new that will need to be maintained. It's all replacing, failing, or other troubled assets that the town owns. And I think that I would like to explain the capital improvement plan in a greater context. I'd like to jump around a bit, give some examples of some things going on now and in the future. This year, we had over 1 million projects that we decided not to fund for various reasons, mostly due to fulfilling more urgent requests. Among that, just over $1 million included $160,000 in tile replacements for the townhouse, a $165,000 replacement rigid hull inflatable boat for the fire department, 3 school projects equaling $95,000, $500,000 that we've been hoping to spend every year on road improvements so that we can repair failing roads or roads that are in trouble in need of repair before they have to be demolished and ultimately just completely rebuilt for much higher cost. and $65,000 for some intersections to the planning department. I'd like to highlight one in specific. The repaving of the Smiths Lane Station 2 parking lot went onto the capital plan 2 years ago, and each year we've had to kick that can down the road. It went on the capital plan at $50,000. This year, the estimate to do the work is $75,000. Over 2 years, it's a 50% increase for something that's essentially prevailing wage labor and aggregate material to do the work. Now, before we get to this year's capital plan, I'd like to talk about some of the other capital coming down the road. And as we just had a police chief here tonight, talking about maybe expanding the police department, we have to think about the fact that he may be looking to add patrol vehicles, which would come under capital, not to mention a new police station and whatever else he has in mind. The year, fiscal year 26 looks fairly normal compared to what we've seen in regular years of capital. A variety of capital coming in somewhere between, well, at least the total requests, $1.5 million to, $1.8 million. In fiscal year 27, we're looking at $1.625 million for 3 projects alone. A trackless machine with attachments for the Streets, Trees, and Parks Department, that's $250,000. And a replacement for ambulance 3, which could be a refurbishment, but the replacement would be $525,000. We won't know if we'll be able to refurb it until we get closer, but that could be between $300,000 and $350,000 or thereabouts. Now, a few meetings ago, the chairman of your committee said, in a few years, we'll be buying a new fire engine probably for $600,000. The last one we acquired was $775,000 somewhere in calendar year 22. The next one is estimated right now to be $850,000, and after discussions with the fire chief, we think it'll probably be $1 million. Between inflation and maintaining compliance with the new diesel standard, diesel engine emission standard coming out in the year 27, that will add between $60,000 to $100,000 per fire engine. In the year 2028, or I should say fiscal year 28, there will be a Vector truck replacement, which is scheduled. 2 years ago, that truck went on the capital plan at $500,000. In 2 years, that has increased to $660,000. I believe that's a 32% increase. The Vector truck, for those who don't know, is a large diesel engine truck with basically a tank and a vacuum on it that cleans out, among other applications it has, cleans out the catch basins in town, so that's your first line of defense against flooding. The price on that truck is increasing as we speak, and is now approaching what a fire engine was just a number of years ago. So if you've heard that inflation is leveling off, you're hearing that inflation on consumer price index products, basic commodities, are leveling off for the time being. It's not applied to these trucks. Many of these future projects are candidate for funding through a lease commitment. And I'm personally hesitant to add any new leases at this time. In fact, we're not proposing any. The engine 3 replacement, without a doubt, would need to be funded through a lease when we are at that point. And certainly we're looking at that for the Vector truck. The other capital requests that I mentioned, who knows, we won't know until we get there. The lease commitments come at a cost, as interest rates are at about 6% right now. They were formerly at 2 to 3%. And they tie up future years' funds, reducing our ability to address new projects as they arise. So the more and more of our capital spend is dedicated to lease commitments, the less we have flexibility to deal with problems that are happening now. If a generator that costs $200,000 fails and we need to replace it, and there's not enough room in the capital plan because of prior years' commitments to leases, the money just won't be there. So we need flexibility in the upcoming years to address capital concerns. I've talked to Chairman Pike, and I believe that the schools are undercapitalized. There are many problems with their facilities. The older section of the KES building has cracking mortar lines in its brick, and the front side of the building, you can tell that the lime in the mortar is washing out. This is probably a fairly large project of repouring all that brickwork once they get to the point where they're going through their building envelope analysis that they've had engineers come in and do. If we don't do these projects, despite the structural integrity of the building and our potential ability to get the roof done, I'm concerned that in towns in the Commonwealth, people will look at a school building that looks like it's getting to be a little older, and they'll say, just demolish it and build a new one. I'm hoping that the capital plan can be put towards averting those costs in the future. That won't be something we can solve with free cash. That'll need a bond, and we'll have to pay for it through taxes. Now, I'd like to talk about capital projects 1, 6, 7, and 8 before moving on to 2 through 5. Project 1 is replacement of the townwide phone system for a cost of $60,000. The phone system is at the end of its useful life. There are 4 servers that need to be replaced. The manufacturer of the phone system is no longer servicing that system. That system serves, as I said, it's townwide, does not serve the schools or the dispatch. Project 6 is $50,000 for engineering of various safety traffic improvements for the Streets, Trees, and Parks Department. Project 7 is replace 2 patrol SUVs for the police department, $158,056. Project 8, replace exterior steel doors at the intermediate school, $100,000. The doors have rust appearing on them. The weather stripping is pretty much gone. The doors have three sets of double doors, 3 to the outside, 3 to the in. Creates an airlock when it's properly weather stripped. It helps with the building's energy efficiency. The importance of the doors, aside from just generally when kids are coming and going, staff, when we're coming and going from town meeting, those doors have to work if there was ever an emergency evacuation. The project also includes some window and screen replacements. Now I'd like to move on to projects 2, 3, 4, and 5. This year we are proposing to replace 4 trucks for the Streets, Trees, and Parks Department. 1 truck for $267,510 is replacing truck H14, a 2002 Sterling made truck. Sterling is a company that went out of business years ago. The truck has already been decommissioned at the end of this winter. There are no parts left on the market for those trucks. If we want to find them, we have to go crawling through junkyards. Another truck, $331,773, is replacing truck H11, a 1998 Ford. A truck for the same cost is replacing truck H12, a 2000 Sterling. Same problem with Sterling. And the last truck is a $180,000 truck replacing H7. It is a 2012 Ford 1-ton dump truck. The frame is beginning to rust. The hydraulic hoses are just disintegrating and rupturing. The cab mounts need to be replaced. It's 14 years old. Now, if there are any questions, I'll take questions. I know that there's probably some concerns about the trucks, and maybe Mr. Bowser can help answer some of them about his department's operations and the role they play.
One question I have is, how many new trucks have we purchased in the last 3 years?
In the 3 years I've been doing this, I believe it's 6, but they're not all for streets, trees, and parks. So there's also
I'm
solid
talking
waste,
just
so it's
street.
2 per year.
Yes, Mr. Basler?
4 trucks have been replaced in the last 3 years.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair? So, and I don't mean to step on the capital planning committee chair's toes here a little bit. Certainly the 4 trucks is a bit unique. There's no question about that. And the challenge we're facing right now is the vehicles that we're looking to replace, as I think was mentioned already. We aren't able to get parts for. They aren't as reliable as we'd like them to be. For good or for bad, we have nearly $3.5 million in free cash. We're looking to utilize just over $1 million of that free cash to purchase the 4 trucks outright. One of the reasons why we think it's prudent is the emissions that are being required on trucks after 2025 are substantially increasing the cost of those vehicles. While we haven't got an exact number on what they're going to be, the dealership has told Mr. Basler that each truck will see an increase in their emissions between 5 and 20%. In addition to
Between
that-
5 and 25,000.
Yeah, I'm working on that.
Sorry.
I'm leading up to it. In addition, there are, we're seeing an increase in the overall cost of a vehicle on an annual basis of about 10%. So what we would be looking at if we deferred one of the trucks is between a $33,000 and a $48,000 increase in cost. We looked at leasing. Leasing, frankly, we have the cash to do what we need to do to replace the trucks. There are 3 different types of trucks that we're looking to acquire: a 1-ton, a 6-wheel, and a 10-wheel, and 2 10-wheel trucks. Those vehicles will, their useful life is different. So when we look 20 or so years down the 15 to 20 years down the line to replace these vehicles, we'll look to stagger those, so we aren't looking at the same challenges we're looking at this year, having to replace all 4. I can't overemphasize, I guess, the inflation cost and the unknowns of the emissions. They're 2 separate engines, but I had the pleasant surprise of speaking to the fire chief right before this meeting, and they're saying that the fire truck engines are going to increase in '26, but just for the engine itself by, I think, $81,000. So while it's not going to increase, these trucks aren't going to increase that much, we know that they're going to increase substantially. We have the resources to purchase these vehicles and get the Public Works Department out of the situation that they're in and set them up long-term in a much more favorable situation. We have a Vactor truck to replace, and we have a sidewalk tractor to replace and a sweeper. But the trucks themselves should be in really, really good shape now for probably the better part of a decade. Is that fair?
We discussed probably we won't be looking at a dump truck until sometime into the 2030s.
So,
which means for the time being, we can do other projects.
So I understand the concern, I understand the amount of money we're asking for, but I think because of all the financial challenges that we're facing, this request frankly makes financial sense.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Hickey.
Sure.
Any other questions? Elaine?
Yeah, since we're on the trucks, how many total trucks are there with street trees and parks?
We got Paul. That's scary. Let's hope he doesn't take his boots off.
Mr. Basler, if you have the answer quicker than me counting in your inventory, which I carried in with me tonight.
Including solid waste,
These are just streets, trees, and parks.
I believe we have 16 trucks total.
So 16 trucks are just streets, trees, and parks.
Okay, so we do these 4, then that would mean half of your fleet's been replaced in the past couple of years.
Why don't you get it? I know, I asked for this, just for that purpose.
No, because 2 of the trucks we purchased in the last 2 years went to the transfer station. One was to replace the 2013 Mack, which has been a lemon since day one. Excuse me. And then 2 years ago, the decision was made to get a roll-off truck to take some of the miles off the tractor. So the roll-off truck is the one that hauls all your containers.
So so then it would be 16 trucks, six were replaced then, so a third of them have been replaced in the past couple of years.
Yeah, 3, because we replaced 2 pickups. Yep.
Okay, and it looked like, based on the write-up, 3 of them are used majority for snow plowing, and only 1's used on a daily basis?
The trucks are spec'd out for snow plowing, but we used them, matter of fact, a couple trucks last week hauling dirt down on the Idina for that job. Plus, they're not used as frequently as the 1-tons in the summer, but they are used also in the summer, fall. Plus, we use one for sweeping also.
And if I could, just one of the challenges, I'm sorry, Paul, one of the challenges we're facing as well, as I'm sure everybody in the room is aware, we have not been able to supplement our our vehicles and staff members in the wintertime with outside plowing vendors. The vendors just either don't want to do it, or they don't find that it's monetarily beneficial for them to do it. So these trucks are being used more frequently in the winter if there is a need to snow for salt or salt or plowing.
The three larger trucks I'm requesting to fill this year cover about 24 to 30 miles of these roadways in the wintertime. When these trucks fail, and these trucks will fail, I can't get parts, I can't get replacement Sanders, which means that the other trucks that we have are gonna be required to be out longer, which is gonna include more overtime. I seem to fail to see, we are trying to replace 25-year-old trucks. I know of no other department in this town that is relying on vehicles that are 25 years old.
If I may, it's not necessarily the need or the desire. I'm just looking at what was just said about future expenses, and somebody better find some revenue fast, because this is all unsustainable, that's all.
This is unsustainable, I agree. And as this chairman said and town administrator said, we haven't addressed the needs of the roadways yet. So
No doubt.
We are correct, we are going in that road, but in front of us right now is the purchase of at least 4 trucks.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heath. I will just point out that the total capital budget that we're looking at here is $2,227,000, including $748,000, which I consider fixed. It's the lease payments from prior purchases. I think that the Finance Committee's responsibility is to look at the reasonableness and the sustainability of the expenditure of town funds. We hear over and over again of the crisis of this item and that item, and we really want to fund everything that we can. However, we also have a responsibility to residents that I personally do not believe this town can afford to spend $2+ million every single year on capital. And that's, what we're looking at. So that's just my comment to put it in perspective of the total numbers that we're looking at. Any other comments from Finance Committee members or questions?
I guess there would be a trade-in value for the trucks currently, and then do we have to go with brand new? Couldn't we just do, I understand we're replacing 25-year-old, but it looks like we're looking at 2020.
Paul, if you'd like to make a comment on trade-ins or buying used vehicles?
As a matter of fact, one of the committee members sent me a link to used equipment. One of the trucks they had is a 2019 Freightliner dump truck. It's located in Colorado. It's got 475,000 miles on it. The town of Kingston has never bought used equipment in the past because of, we'll be honest, because we're buying somebody else's problems. I've looked at trying to extend these lives of these trucks. I've done everything I can as a department head and as a resident of this town to increase the longevity of the vehicles that are under my direction. It's time.
Is there any trade-in value for the trucks that
Well, the truck that I just talked to you about was for $90,000, so somebody might buy these, maybe $5 grand, $10 grand. We might get down the road if we decide to try to sell the Mac. We might get a little more for that, but once again, they're so old that you can't get parts. If somebody's going to buy it, they're probably going to buy it for parts, so they can extend the life of their trucks.
And so we're not opposed to buying a used vehicle. The challenge we've had is when we've looked at what's available in the used vehicle market in this particular case, you're either getting vehicles that other construction companies, municipalities, what have you, that need these vehicles, no longer have traded them in or are looking to sell them outright and aren't in the condition, really, frankly, to acquire, or they're so old that we're in the same situation we are now. So it's not that we haven't looked at a used vehicle opportunity. There just aren't any used vehicles out there that we could recommend to this committee, to the Board of Selectmen, and ultimately the town meeting, that is a better option than what we're proposing to you this evening.
Okay, thank you.
If I could just add one more thing, Mr. Chairman, is if we get the okay to purchase these vehicles come May, I won't see any of these trucks till probably late '25 or early 2026. Thank you.
Elaine, you have a question?
Yeah, just on number 6, on the engineering, how many projects is that for? And is, if you get the engineering done, is there funds to do whatever the projects there are?
We are looking for additional funding. I know I'm working with the town planner. Mass DOT has just set up a new programs to go out and try to get more funding sources. But right now, no, there is no additional funding needed or available.
If I could, oftentimes the state is looking for shovel-ready projects.
Right.
If we don't have an appropriation for engineering work, so we can provide a shovel-ready project, we won't be eligible for those grants. So the $60,000, frankly, if we're lucky, would go towards maybe 2 projects. In all likelihood, maybe just 1. But again, we're leveraging that money where we can for grant funds for the construction.
No, I mean, it makes sense, so that's why I asked.
Yep,
Because,
yep.
if
Sure.
we're doing engineering and it's not feasible for another 5 years, but if it's an add-on for a grant, that makes sense.
Sure.
I'm very familiar with
Yep.
shovel-ready.
Yep.
But some of the engineering could be culvert replacements also. We have some older culverts that need to be started to be engineering, so hopefully we can get some additional funding through different programs that either the federal government offer or the state government offers for paying of those types of projects.
Derek?
Yeah, real quick, the patrol replacements, are those going to be hybrids similar to what was acquired in the past?
They're both hybrids.
Okay.
And,
last year, the finance committee, several of us took a capital planning field trip with the town manager who got hit in the head.
Not at the police station.
Not at the police station, and we did see sort of the nature of the need. So
Yes, there's a slight higher cost, I believe, on the hybrid because of the special motor. The former police chief had applied for and won grants to cover that. The police spend about 40 to 60% of the time, and there's a lieutenant in the room, he can correct me if I'm wrong, idling in their vehicles. So you want that engine to just shut off, and supposedly on the newer models, they come right up to speed even quicker than the non-hybrid models do.
right, and the expectation is that we would get some longevity because we wouldn't have the wear. and
I
tear
asked
on
that
the
question
motors.
because I did not want them to change the program unless they had some logic that supported not doing that.
All right, Finance Committee, we have a lot to cover, so I think I'd like to cut this one off and vote each one of the individual purchase items. I'm going to suggest that the lease items on the second page, 747,515, that this really is a fixed cost that the town has to pay. So I'd like to have these moved as one item for the 747,515 worth of leases in order to move this meeting on.
All right. I move the Finance Committee recommend the approval of proposed lease payments for fiscal '25 subsequent to projects 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 under Article 19 in the amount of $747,515.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 600.
All right, I'm gonna do the remainder of Article 19 so that we can all take a deep breath about the vehicles, at least for a moment. I move that the Finance Committee recommend approval under Article 19 of project number 1, $60,000 for replacement to the townwide phone system.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 600.
I move the Finance Committee recommend favorable action under Article 19 for project number 6, $50,000 in engineering for various traffic safety improvements.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. 5-1 in favor.
I move the Finance Committee recommend favorable action under Article 19 for project number 7, $158,056 to replace police patrol SUVs.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 600.
I move the Finance Committee recommend favorable action on Article 19, project number 8, $100,000 to replace the exterior steel doors at the intermediate school.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 600.
I'm certainly happy to see there be discussion once this gets seconded, but I move the Finance Committee recommend approval under Article 19 of Project Number 2, $267,510 for one vehicle replacement for the Streets, Trees, and Parks Department.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 600.
I move the Finance Committee recommend favorable action under Article 19 of Project Number 3, $331,773 for a second vehicle replacement for the Streets, Trees, and Parks Department.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 600.
I move the Finance Committee recommend favorable action under Article 19 of Project Number 4, $331,773 for a third vehicle replacement for Streets, Trees, and Parks.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstained?
I'll oppose that one as well.
4-2 in favor of that.
I move the Finance Committee recommend favorable action on Article 19 of Project Number 5, $180,000 for a fourth vehicle replacement for the Streets, Trees, and Parks Department.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. 5-1 in favor. That takes care of Article 19. Thank you, Heath. Excellent. The next one is the equipment purchase, Article 20. I think the major question that we had on this one was project number 6, $62,500 for MS4 compliance permit proposed by Conservation. I guess my only question on this, my question on this one, isn't this the one that in prior years we've been funding $50,000 or $75,000 or something a year for it? Anybody?
So I believe there was, in fiscal '24, there was an appropriation for $75,000. It's an annual permit that needs to be filed for and obtained through the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for our drainage, stormwater, thank you, stormwater flow throughout town and whatnot. So there needs to be an inventory done and a report created and provided by an engineering firm that we hire to allow us to maintain our MS4 permit.
I'm certainly glad that we're going to be spending over $500,000, so we've already spent a good piece of it for this Environmental Protection Agency requirement. And people, it's, I guess, a fact of life of doing business in the Commonwealth.
I just have a question on Project 3, electronic voting pads and supporting materials at town meeting, that
Sure.
no longer hand votes, that it wants to be electronic.
So yes, there'd be a handheld device that would allow each person who's there voting to push a button for yes or push a button for no, to allow for a more accurate count and a quicker count when a hand count's required. But I guess it's been something that's been requested or discussed in town for a while.
I've heard them called clickers.
Yeah. I mean, they're,
How many clickers are envisioned to be purchased?
You
With-
expecting a big turnout?
I know that at one time, when we looked at this 5 years ago, there was the talk about trying to do it in a way that we might even be able, say we bought 200, saying that we expect the average town meeting to be 200 people, and then we had something on the agenda that we said, uh-oh, we're gonna have 500 people at the meeting. Well, they were hoping to do it such that maybe you'd be able to borrow another town's 300 extras to be able to, not have to have 500 on hand when you're probably gonna use 500 once every 5 years or something.
So there's either 150, and I apologize, I've just reached out to the town clerk. I believe there's either 150 or 200 clickers that are involved in this. And to the chairman's point, if there was an article or a town meeting that we anticipated having a larger number of people, we could borrow another neighboring community's clickers, for lack of a better term, if they don't have a town meeting the same day we do. So we're trying to keep it as affordable as possible.
I must admit, I watched the Plymouth town meeting the other day, and I know that they have, representative town meeting, which, by the way, I wish Kingston would do. But in any case, it really was efficient and effective, watching the way those 150 people voted and the instantaneous counts that were reported.
I know, like you said, when this was looked at years ago, it was supposed to do meeting minutes. I mean, is this just literally a counter? Or is there any other thing that had?
No, I don't know how anything would ever do town meeting minutes, frankly. So this is for the hardware needed for
it sounds like it's just
clicker.
a clicker.
It's a piece of software that the clickers will connect to, and as the votes come in, as people, vote one way or another, it will count those votes and report that as such.
I understand that this feels, and it really does to me as well, somewhat absurd to pick on a project like this, given the amount of money we just looked at, but it is really hard for me to see this as a necessity in the context of the myriad other things that we're looking at. And so I'm gonna make motions that we look at these individually, and I'm not gonna support either of these projects.
That's fine. I was gonna say, that's why we look at them individually and why we can vote yes or no. Are there any other questions on any of the other items? I'm never excited about, like, Article number 8, evaluate intermediate school air conditioning needs. We hire facilities people, and we then have to go out and spend $30,000 for somebody to tell us whether we need air conditioning or not. I think as a town, we tend to spend too much money on consulting fees and studies and that type of thing, but that's, just my point, and that's why I may be voting against that particular one.
I agree with you, Mr. Chair. I would argue item 9, that sounds a lot like an Eagle Scout project to me.
On the other hand, we've been accused before of not properly supporting the schools from what I call a capital kind of project type of basis. And these items are, similar to capital and not something that they're gonna put in their regular budget. So I must admit, I have mixed emotions.
Does the intermediate school currently have air conditioning? Is that?
If I recall from the capital planning tour, it does not. It is set up for air conditioning, and then I was told from some neighbor that air conditioning was taken away and that those funds were used for the senior center. That last part is completely anecdotal and could be 100% false.
Okay.
All right, are we ready to vote these 6 items or 10 items?
I recommend the Finance Committee, I move the Finance Committee recommend approval under Article 20, project number 1, $4,667 for a fit test machine for self-contained breathing apparatus masks, town share of a project totaling approximately $24,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 6-0-0.
I move the Finance Committee recommend approval under Article 20 of project number 2, $7,975 for election poll pads for voter check-in at elections.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed,
No.
5-1.
I move the Finance Committee recommend approval of Article 20, project number 3, $9,985 for electronic voting keypads and supporting materials.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
No.
Is that 2 in favor or 3?
In favor.
In favor?
Favor.
3-3?
No, I'm in favor, so I think it's 4-2.
4. Who's opposed? Raise your hand. 2. 4-2, okay.
Maybe we can have electronic voting keypads to count our votes.
Yeah,
Case in
exactly.
point.
Multi-purpose.
I move the Finance Committee recommend approval under Article 20 of project number 4, $12,000 for replacement of ceiling tiles at the Reed Building.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 6-0.
I move the Finance Committee recommend approval under Article 20 of project number 5, $14,000 for replacement of existing rugs. The Council on Aging.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 6-0.
Move the Finance Committee recommend approval under Article 20 of project number 6, $60,500 for an MS4 compliance permit.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, reluctantly. Opposed? 6-0.
Maybe we can get the clickers to have a separate yes, but reluctant.
Then nobody would know how we voted.
I move the Finance Committee recommend approval under Article 20, project number 7, $25,000 for upgrades to steel doors and partitions with poly doors and partitions
Second.
at one of the schools.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 6-0.
Move the Finance Committee recommend approval under Article 20, project number 8, $30,000 to evaluate intermediate school air conditioning needs.
Second.
All in favor? All opposed?
No.
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 0-6,
6-0? 0-6, rather.
Move the Finance Committee recommend approval under Article 20 of project number 9, $40,000 to paint hallways, closets, and classrooms at KIS.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Let him. Eagle Scout.
So is that opposed or not? You opposed?
Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah. I move the Finance Committee recommend approval under Article 20, project number 10, $32,600 for removal of trees near the Adams Center and Reed buildings that are causing retaining wall damage.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? 6-0 in favor. The next one is the CPC, Community Preservation Committee items, Article 22. The first piece of the article is for the, did we vote that? No, I guess we didn't. We didn't vote any of this, right? The administrative budget and the fund appropriations, the administrative budget being the normal one where they move some dollars into the open space, historic preservation, and community housing buckets, and they appropriate the personal services and minimal expenses of about $20,000. Does anybody have any questions on that first part of the article? I move that the Finance Committee recommend approval of the first part of the Article 22, which is the administrative budget and fund appropriations.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 6-0.
As much as I enjoy making these motions before I start, is it possible that we could glance through these and see if we want to separate any of them out?
Certainly, and I sent out some more detail, and we also, you know, I think that the CPC committee did a good job in their descriptions here on the warrant article of telling, you know, showing what each one of the projects are.
Yeah, the information you sent was quite helpful, thank you.
Regardless of the priority, the money's coming out of CPC, so.
Question is, the Major John Bradford home, is that privately owned?
It is a what?
Is it privately owned?
No.
Yes.
It's a nonprofit.
Yeah, okay.
It's not a town building.
No. CPC has funded other projects for them in the past.
Before I make a motion, does anybody want any projects excluded from a general motion on Article 22?
I just have a couple of questions. The, buying the bog property, I don't understand the numbers. And the initial intro, it says the purchase price is 3.5. It's 3.3 million, and they're looking at 2 million for a grant, leaving a balance of 1.3 million. But then on page 7, the write-up says it's a 2.2 million. So if there was any clarity on that.
I wish I could provide some, I apologize, I don't have any clarity on that.
Okay.
I'm sorry for that.
Yeah, it's, is it,
That might be separate.
it's this one right here. Fund the advance of Jones River corridor preservation. They're asking for 50,000 from CPC, but I'm just trying to get at what's the project. And then, is it a practice that Eagle Scout projects get paid through CPC? That's
Last
just
year
new.
was the first one, and I see that we do have a second one here. And I personally probably support having something different, that we've tended to have CPC articles, either recreation, conservation, and there's one other.
Affordable housing.
Affordable
Open space.
housing. That, well, we move the money for affordable housing, but we don't do anything with it. It's accumulating interest in the bank.
All right. I move the Finance Committee recommend approval of each of the 6 projects listed under Article 22 that have not already been voted.
Is there anybody that would like to object to doing it this way? Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? 600. Okay, here's a good one. Article 24, the wage and personnel bylaw amendments. I tend to, must admit, have my 10 years on the committee here, have tended to just approve this, to recommend it, feeling that the Wage and Personnel Committee has done their work, et cetera, on it. I will point out the fact that, we're putting 3.5% in as cost of living adjustments, so that, right off the bat, when we put in a 3.5% cost of living adjustment, and we have a Proposition 2.5, and, we have additional growth that will maybe give us 1%, but when everybody that works for the town, or in these categories, is getting a 3.5% raise, and we don't have much room, Mr. Taxpayer, Mrs. Taxpayer out there, if you don't get up and holler, don't come to the Finance Committee asking why are your taxes going up so much. Any other comments on the wage and personnel article?
I did reach out about this one, and the 3.5 is what's in the union contracts. So typically, wage and personnel will follow suit. So I think it's bigger than the wage and personnel.
I agree 100%. I agree 100%.
I likewise, and I have no issue with this, I just want to point out for folks who are unfamiliar with the way that these schedules work, that it's unless you have reached the outer limit of your step and grade, it's generally much more than 3.5%, which helps explain why we're having to make the choices we are.
Yeah, that with step increases, we're always looking at, if we're gonna use 3.5% here, 5, 6, 7%. Yeah, I'm not sure that the finance committee is doing our job when we don't at least point this out and say, hey, we may not be strong enough to stop it, but taxpayers, if you want to continue to, have your taxes every year go up 3, 4%, 5%, and we are headed to a Proposition 2.5 override requirement. It's not this year. I think it could be next year, but it's certainly going to be within 5 years that people better be ready for it at this rate.
Move the Finance Committee recommend favorable action on Article 24.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Done. Article 25, Council on Aging Needs Assessment for Kingston.
I'm going to recuse myself from this and step off.
Thank you, Elaine. The Council on Aging is looking for $35,000 from free cash to do a needs assessment. Well, I may be biased, but I consider myself a senior citizen, and I consider that I'm doing fine in town without having anybody look into what I need. So I am categorically opposed to spending any money on this kind of a consultant's study. I welcome any other comments from the board members.
I tend to agree with you, Mr. Chair. I reviewed the information that was provided. I really did not see a benefit beyond a very flashy brochure at the end of the day.
And again, we talk about, doing it not only for the senior citizens, but for all residents. Well, when we're doing something like this, aren't we looking above and beyond the so-called level services? Level services to me means that what we've been doing for the last 5 years is what we're going to continue to do. But, we're always looking for ways to spend more money and it's not only this $35,000, but as soon as this was done, would we be coming back, having people looking for additional money for this project or this program or to communicate this? So enough said by me.
I'm not sure if the question was ever answered. I asked it last time. With the accreditation process, how does it affect that, and what impact does being an accredited community, what does that mean for us as a community?
We have our Director of Council on Aging here who will speak to that.
Thank you very much. If I may, I put this in your packets a little bit through the town administrator earlier today. Just a one sheet that kind of gives you an overview about what it is that we're looking to do. Thank you, I'm so sorry. This is something that when you look at Kingston as a community, I like to use the analogy of a master plan. You guys have invested a great deal of money and time and effort over the last 20 years to put together a master plan that essentially says to you, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is what we've accomplished, and this is where we need to go. What the needs assessment is and what the age and dementia-friendly initiative is essentially that. But I want to point out, not just for seniors, but also for the community at large. And if I may just take 2 minutes, I want to read from that statement that I sent you earlier, because I think if you haven't had a chance to read it, I just want to go through this. While this initiative started out as an age and dementia-friendly movement over the last 10 years, it's morphed into more community-wide crusade meant to include not just those residents aged 60 and older, but also create an action plan that allows cities and towns the ability to establish a vision for all of the 8 domains of livability for everyone. And that's an important piece to remember, because we're talking about the quality of life in this community. We would create an action plan that focuses on establishing a vision for these domains, which include transportation, housing, respect and social inclusion, civic participation and employment, outdoor spaces and buildings, social participation, communication and information, as well as community support and health services. Within each of these areas, a vision statement is created, followed by a series of recommendations with a corresponding set of action steps that need to be taken. A permanent group of stakeholders is created to monitor implementation of the plan, evaluate its effectiveness, and update as necessary. By doing this, we create an age-friendly community that optimizes opportunities for everyone to ensure a quality of life and dignity as people age in Kingston. Think of it as the city of Salem does, an age-friendly action for all ages. The dollars needed for the needs assessment would allow us to work with the experts from the Center for Social and Demographic Research on Aging at the Gerontology Institute of the University of Massachusetts at Boston. These experts are dedicated to forming a collaborative participatory process that will allow us to identify, understand, and prioritize needs that older residents of Kingston have in order to establish Kingston as a place to age well. This information gathering process will inform other areas in town from a planning and development perspective, as well as serve as a snapshot in time to allow the senior center to develop strategic programs as needed and noted by our residents. This process includes a document review, demographic profile, 4 separate community forums, 3 focus groups, 5 to 6 key informant interviews, and mailed surveys to all residents age 55 plus, which would also be available both electronically, online, and paper copies. Like Carl, I don't like surveys, and I'll tell you why. Because they're dead documents. Because by and large, we think we're doing something really special and fancy, and we go out and we spend a great deal of money, and that money says this is an important survey. But the problem is, at the end of the day, that survey is only as good as the results that you get from the survey and the will of the people in the community to come together as a community to determine what it is you want your community to look like. I understand. Right now, you are faced with some absolutely horrendous decisions going forward for the upcoming fiscal 25 years. I've been to all the meetings. I've heard your discussions. I don't want to be you, to be perfectly honest with you. I just don't. It's very hard to be sitting up there. But I want you to look at this as so I look at it this way. The veterans came to you last year. They tried so hard to raise money for a veterans project. Yes, it's something that's going on the front lawn of the townhouse, but it's more than just a monument. It's the support of the people that made this community what it is. And we're not taking care of just them. We're looking ahead to future generations. Your children and your grandchildren need a place to stay, and that's what we're trying to provide for them. It's esoteric, I get it. It's out there, I get it, and this may not be the year, but I can tell you this, we're not giving up. Everything that we do, the accreditation that we're seeking for the Kingston Senior Center, the accreditation that I will be seeking as a Senior Center Director for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, all starts with the way that we look at who we are. It's the way that the fire department seeks accreditation, the way that the police department seeks accreditation. It's standards and practices that we establish that shows that we know what we're doing and we have the best practices in mind for the residents of Kingston, not just seniors.
Does anybody have any further questions? Thank you.
I see the value in the assessment, but at the same time, as you can see, our budget's really tight, and that's a significant amount of money. Can it be reduced at all, or what's the 35,000?
So I have sought other funding mechanisms. I went to the Sampson Fund, and they were told that it's not exactly in their wheelhouse, and we were trying to get something through the compact grant, and that's possibly, if we could do it again, it might be another year down the road. This is one of those kind of things where
Could you maybe answer the specific question as to, if we had this accreditation, what does that do for the town, or what does that?
So let me ask you, so the accreditation that you're talking about for the senior center?
Well, it says, in the article, It says, as part of the accreditation process to become an age and dementia-friendly community.
So the way that was part of the process that I sent to you. So once the survey's done, and I gave you some sample surveys, this is from Situate locally, this is the survey itself. Then I sent you a copy of the results of the survey. Once the results of the survey are done, and you know, this is your snapshot. It tells you, this is where we're at, this is what we need, this is where we need to go as a community.
So in other words, being accredited doesn't give me the ability to get any new grants or anything like that.
Well, one of the things that's going to be happening, that's why I thought when we were talking about the accreditation, the senior center will be seeking accreditation on its own, because one of the things that this particular program is asking for is for your center to be accredited. So again, standards and practices, the way that you view your community and how you set those in place for yourself, it's raising the bar for everyone. It's not just relying on saying, we've been doing that way for the last 15 years. Well, maybe the last 15 years haven't always given you the result that you may have it because you want it, but it's a result that you need. So, and yes, to answer your question, that's something that people pay attention to. Currently, over 220 communities in Massachusetts have either received or are seeking this designation. And Massachusetts has made it a priority almost for the last 8 years.
You said you had a copy of the similar survey done in Situate?
I do. You have it in your packet that was sent to you by Town Administrator Keith Hickey earlier today.
Okay, I did not have a chance to review that. Do you happen to know off
Would you like my copy?
I really have one question, at least for right now. Do you have the response rate to that survey?
Yes, it's in the survey itself. The beauty
What
about
is
the
it?
survey, it's within there. I don't want to take up any more time looking. The point about the survey is that you determine what the survey says. So in this particular circumstance, say we're looking at over 55. I don't want to look at just over 55. For me, I want to look at anybody age 50 and older, because the greatest group of people that's coming forward in this community right now is 45 to 60. It actually equals the number of people that I have that are currently, that I take care of, age 60 and older. That's the scary part about this, is that we're not meeting the need of the 4,000 that we have now. Man, we are going to be so underwater as we go forward, because it's not just about a physical building. It's about the department itself and what we have decided we want this department to be for the town.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate everything that was said. I tend to share Debbie and some of the other concerns that have been raised, that we're kind of fundamentally not really a policy-making body so much as a financial one. And I am also concerned that there is some language in this that invites a sort of scope creep that is going to snowball year over year. So I'm going to join the others in opposition.
All right, let's have a motion on the $35,000 for
I move-
Article 25.
I move the Finance Committee recommend approval of Article 25.
I'll second it. All in favor? All opposed?
No.
Nay? One abstain? One abstain. 051 opposing the article. The next one is Article 26. I've been asked to revote that, and I was asked by somebody who had voted in favor of it, so that's a valid request. So we're going to revote Article 26, which is the article that increases the senior and veteran property tax work-off amount from $1,000 maximum annually to $1,250 annually.
And just to add, that was me because I take advantage of one of the programs, so I shouldn't be voting on something that financially may benefit me, so.
Do we have a sense of the bottom line impact of this, of making this change?
If I had to guess, and from my experience when I was treasurer, I would say maybe at the maximum, 40 people times $250.
So 10
So maybe 10 grand. And I suspect it could be closer to 5 grand.
So I make a motion for favorable action on Article 26.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
So this one is now 501 as opposed to the 601 that we had because our vacationing member voted to abstain the last time and he's not here now.
Thank you.
Article 29, vote the, I'm not sure that we needed to vote this, adapt the changes to the general bylaws. I think we had discussed it a bit last meeting. I didn't feel that we needed to vote it, but does anybody else feel we should be voting it?
Do any of the changes directly impact us?
I haven't even looked at them.
Well, it's
No.
not financially related, so I wouldn't think we need a vote on it.
No, it's not, so it's not financially related. We're looking to, what the town clerk has been working on with General Code, the company we've hired, is to have them review our bylaws, update those where they need to be updated to reflect the appropriate Mass General Law, things of that nature, correct some grammar and those types of things. I think the FinCom vote decided at your last meeting not to vote on Article 29 or 30 because they're both related to the bylaw. And I think you also frankly voted to move forward and not vote on Article 31 either.
Hey, do we need a formal motion, or can we just pass over?
Does anybody else want to vote on this?
I don't see a need
No.
either.
Okay. Are you okay, Deb, or do you want us to formally vote?
No, I agree.
Okay. So that completes our review of the warrant articles that we did not review last time, with the exception of the budget article, which includes the school budgets that we have not yet discussed in too much detail.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. Articles 32 and 33, I don't recall the board making a decision on the pilot agreement, whether you want to even vote on that or not. I just don't recall, and maybe Rhonda has a different recollection, but
I had in my notes here that we weren't going to vote those two.
okay, thank you.
There's still 34. I think that could have some financial impact on the town, so that might be worth something else considering.
Again, I feel that that is the zoning article that we tend not to vote on. That, you know, one could say that every zoning article has some financial impact. But does anybody else want to vote on Article 34?
The planning board is makes much more sense as a recommendation.
I
Site
agree
for
with that.
To be clear, it seems like a great idea, but
Well, Mary was here, I think, at the last meeting. She was actually recommending we support it.
Okay. Jason, take one and pass it down.
Just like in school.
Okay, the next item we'll talk about are the school budgets. We talked about them last month. There were a lot of school committee meetings. I've attended them all. The sheet that I just handed out, in the middle column, school committees approved budgets, okay? That is a total of $31,313,000, made up of $16,744,000 as the Silver Lake assessment to the town of Kingston, $14,569,000 as the local schools budget. That is an increase of $2,912,000 over the FY '24 budget. And I would also point out that the FY '24 budget, the year that we're in right now, included an increase over the prior year of $1,866,000, which was 7%. However, in addition to that $1,866,000, we, as a town, provided $650,000 to try to cover some of the overruns that they were having from the prior year. If you factor that in, you're over 9%. So we looked at a 9% education budget increase last year, and we're looking at 10.3% now. To give you an idea of what's happened since then, the school administration, meaning the superintendent and the principals of all of the 4 schools involved, the high school, the intermediate, the middle school, the intermediate school, and our elementary school, they each looked at potentially additional budget reductions. The local schools came up with $1,100,000. They agreed, they accepted reductions of $388,000, leaving $712,000 that they chose not to touch. Silver Lake Regional School District was given a total reduction option of $1,006,000. They chose not to do any further reductions at all. And when it's $1,006,000, I point out that at approximately 55%, which Kingston is of the 3 towns, that amount would have been $553K coming toward reducing the assessment to Kingston. So what I think the first step I want to do with the Finance Committee here is see if there's a motion to, I guess maybe we ought to talk in general, because one of the things I want to do tonight is give the Finance Committee an option of voting to support this 10.3% increase just the way it is. And then I'm going to give if the Finance Committee says yes, done. We don't have to do any more. Then I will have some options. That's what's the other columns on this paper, where the Finance Committee would recommend some reductions, or the Finance Committee would go to town meeting with a budget that was less than the school committees have recommended. To give you an idea of where we stand with the total budget for the schools right now at 10.3%, and you'll see that I have this so-called excess levy capacity. When I did this a few days ago, it was $900,000. Right now, it's been reduced to $854,000 because of adjustments that have been made in other things. So I guess, and we have our business manager from the schools, from the Silver Lake Regional School District, Sarah Hickey here, and we have a school committee member from the Kingston and Silver Lake regional school here. Would either one of you like to say anything concerning the budget status or your position that the school committees took? Mark Guidaboni is our Kingston, one of our Kingston representatives on the Silver Lake School Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and FinCom members. I actually wasn't prepared to present. What I will tell you is this has been a challenging budget season. Button. Thank you. This has been a challenging budget season for a number of reasons. First and foremost was that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education directed the Silver Lake Regional School District to make some substantial changes in structure. And so essentially they said to Silver Lake Regional School District, you're not an elementary school. We're not fully regionalized, and we have staff currently right now that are being paid by Silver Lake that work at Kingston Intermediate School and work at Kingston Elementary School. And the preschool program are Silver Lake staff members, and that was part of the vote that you took. And I apologize, I forgot to mention, I started working for Silver Lake Regional School District right after Thanksgiving, and I don't know when Kingston voted on the regional agreement. But part of the regional agreement was to make the integrated preschool part of Silver Lake. So now that program will fully be a Silver Lake program. So all of these changes caused shifting costs. So you can't really look at your Kingston budget, your operating budget for the intermediate school and the elementary school from FY24 and compare it to FY25, because there are staff members that are being paid by Silver Lake this year that will be paid by Kingston next year that have moved out of the Silver Lake budget into the Kingston budget. The other thing the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education directed was that out-of-district tuitions for special education students need to be paid by the school in which the student's peers attend school. So an 8th grade student right now that is living in Kingston and attending a private placement, an out-of-district placement for special education, that's currently in the Kingston budget, and next year that tuition and transportation for that student would be in the Silver Lake budget. So as I started saying, it's a challenging budget year because there was the shifting, which made things hard to look at from year to year to year. The second part of the challenging budget season was that there has been an increase in contracted costs. And when I say contracted costs, I mean everything from negotiated agreements with unions to contracts we have with vendors for elevator repair and inspections, just any type of, the cost of everything is going up. So an increase in contracted costs, an increase in supplies, as well as an increase in special education tuition and transportation costs, as well as an increase in the number of students eligible for special ed transportation and out-of-district tuitions. And so all of those things put together, when I finished all 4 budgets back in January and put all the budgets on one spreadsheet and looked at the overall increase in education to Halifax, Kingston, Plimpton, Silver Lake, it was an outrageous increase. The school administration worked diligently in February and March to throw everything we had at the budget to to get it down to a 13.4% increase in total cost of education to all 3 towns. And then we kept working on it. So on March 14th, Silver Lake voted to approve a $39,769,000 budget. That required an $855,000 reduction from the level service budget that was presented. Silver Lake Regional School District also voted to use $750,000 from excess and deficiency. That's the equivalent of free cash for a regional school district. To use that as revenue to reduce the assessments to the 3 towns. And then on April 3rd, Kingston voted a $14,568,000 budget, which required a $388,000 reduction from level service.
Thank you. Does anybody have any specific questions? I can tell you that I've gone through and spent a lot of time on the budget. There are, last time around, I handed out some analysis that Sarah had presented to the school committees, but very difficult for, I think, a layman finance guy to really follow through. Because one of the things I always try to do, and it's just so difficult to say, okay, we've got, well, in Kingston's case here, it's a $3 million increase, $2.9 million. How much of that is transportation? How much of it is teacher salaries? How much of it is special ed students going outside the district? But I just have never been successful in coming up with those kind of simple analyses. Would you agree with that, that it's difficult to say, that if I said to you, okay, and I'll even do it at the total level, that the 3 towns plus the Silver Lake at 45 million, whatever it is, you know, versus last year of 38 million, whatever that number was, what makes up that 7 million in simple terms that I can talk to the guy on the street about?
I'm going to do this from memory again. I apologize, I wasn't prepared to speak, but in my March 14th presentation to the Silver Lake School Committee, I took the budget for all 4 entities that I work with, Silver Lake, Halifax, Kingston, and Plimpton. I took all of the line items and put them all on the same spreadsheet and then divided them up by the categories that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education give us. So the 1,000 lines is administration, the 2,000s is instruction, the 3,000s is pupil services, the 4,000s is operations and maintenance, 5,000s is benefits and insurance, the 6,000s we don't use, 7,000s are, when I say we don't use, very few school districts in Massachusetts use the 6,000s category. The 7,000s are extraordinary maintenance costs and large purchases of buildings and lands and things like that. The 8,000s we don't use. The 9,000 category is special education, tuition, and transportation. So I took all 4 budgets, all the line items, all 1,000 of them, put them on one spreadsheet, and then rebroke them up by those categories so I could look at what was the cost for instruction in FY24, what was the cost for instruction in FY25, or what was the cost for pupil services in 24 and the cost in 25. And only when I was able to separate things out like that, I was able to notice that there were some patterns. The cost for special education instruction across the 4 entities had a dramatic increase. That makes sense to me, though, because we had staff members that were being paid out of revolving accounts that were being paid, the revolving accounts were receiving money from the out-of-district tuition lines from each of the towns, the money was going into the revolving account and then paying for the staff. So the Silver Lake staff working at Kingston Intermediate School this year is being paid out of a revolving account, and then that revolving account is being charged proportionally from the students in that staff member's class, whatever percent from Kingston, Plimpton, Halifax. So moving the teachers from the revolving accounts into the operating budget, it would make sense that the special ed instructional costs would increase dramatically. But when I parsed the budget out like that, there was a substantial increase in our out-of-district special education transportation costs, which is a challenge for districts all across the state, and out-of-district tuitions.
Okay, and I have your presentation right here that I'm just trying to explain to my finance committee members here that I've been to several meetings. This particular presentation that Sarah's talking about was about 45 pages. I tried to break it back to about 20 pages that I thought I could follow some of the information. But in order to think that we're going to ask a few questions and get specific numbers, I think is very difficult. That, you know, I'm looking at a page here. At this time, they were looking at $7,439,000 aggregate increase for FY25. Administration, $226K. Instruction, $6,044,000. Student services, $231,000. Operations and maintenance, $434,000. Benefits, $475,000. Tuition and transportation, $76,000. Then we had things like special education staff added during FY24, approximately $470,000. So you add it in 24, it goes into the budget in 25, there's $500,000.
That's added, but what was the full special needs budget?
What was it?
Yeah, I thought you said it was, they added 400.
Well,
Or
it
that
was,
wasn't the total budget, right?
yeah, it's just a piece of the total, whatever the number was.
Oh, because I thought, I heard you say that the special education takes a big chunk of the budget, of the school budget.
It does.
Like, what is that amount?
There's two different circumstances that would require the adding of staff. If a student on their individualized educational plan requires, say for example, a one-to-one paraprofessional with them, then the district is obligated by law to provide that. And so any staff that's hired this year during the year that wasn't budgeted for last spring would be in a case like that. The other piece is the preschool principal. Because the preschool had to become a separate program, the preschool principal was added after the towns voted the budget last year. So the additional costs, because the restructuring of the district, we couldn't have Dr. Whipple supervise the preschool anymore. And then, so that required a dedicated administrator. And then, again, any student that required some sort of staffing accommodation, we're required to provide that.
And here's another example of the type of analysis that $1,660,000 aggregate new cost projections for FY25, which is $1,114,000 for tuition. Most of that, or not all of it, is going to be special ed. And transportation, $546,000. So it's a lot of information, and it's definitely available. But I spent as much time as I could to understand it in more detail, and I just question how much more we're gonna be able to understand tonight, except at a total level.
I do have one quick question for you. You said that part of the restructuring, the folks who are Silver Lake employees working at the KES or KIS had previously been paid out of a revolving fund, and they now need to be paid out of the operating budget. What has happened to the revenue that was previously going into that revolving fund?
So those revolving accounts are net zero accounts, and so that's one of the first things I went looking for when I put all the budgets together and said, holy cow, this is such a huge increase. I went looking for those revolving accounts and buckets of money, and I didn't find them. So the explanation I was given is the money actually exists in the operating budget in the out-of-district tuition line. So a student in Halifax that attends the specific program at Kingston Intermediate School, that is technically out of district, even though we try to think of us all being a whole, not being a fully regionalized district, that's actually correct in the payment. So there's money in the out-of-district tuition line in Halifax that will be billed by the special education bookkeeper and put into the revolving account, and then the staff members are paid out of the revolving account. So when we think revolving accounts, we think revenue source. There's not really a revenue source. It's collecting money out of places in the operating budgets from the 3 towns.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that helps somewhat. Now, I think that the first thing we ought to do, perhaps, is I'll make the motion to have the Finance Committee support the education budgets as presented. If we vote 7-0, we're done. If we vote 4-3, we're done. If we vote 3-4 or 0-7, then we'll start looking at the next step, what we want to do in recommending potential differences to town meeting. Does anybody?
I'll second for discussion.
Yeah.
I didn't make the motion yet, so we're just discussing now.
Oh, okay. I thought you did.
Yeah, no.
So I apologize, this might come off as a bit of a soliloquy, but my husband and I moved to this town with the expectation that we would be getting schooling that would be commensurate with the house that we bought and the life that we want to have for our children. And to see a town go and decide that we're going to pursue level services everywhere except for children is really not the message that I think I want to be sending as a member of this committee. And so I will be supporting the budget as it was presented. I know that is a lot. My husband and I's house, feel free to look it up, is assessed at double what the average house value is in Kingston. We will be paying a lot more, but we are doing this for the school system as a whole and for the future value that it will have. And I don't need to tell the committee, but I will bring it up again. Analysis after analysis after analysis has shown that that cutting school funding or dropping standards for education is detrimental to home values. Even in the most objective ways possible, student to teacher ratio, you can measure that in dropping home values. And if individuals are concerned with the long of the short of it, really, we're voting to protect both our home value and our future for children. So I will end it there.
I absolutely respect
and I understand
your
others
position.
are in a different standpoint, but I just want to make sure that everyone does not think I am a tax and spend New Deal Democrat up here. I am.
Thank you.
All right.
But that's at a 10.3% increase.
It is at a 10.3% increase, but I will tell you that this is a lower tax rate than my mom was paying back in 2004 when she lived in Pennsylvania, in a school system that had a high number of individuals that were special ed. And, you know, for what it's worth, I had speech therapy, so I technically would have counted as a special ed individual at part of my schooling as well, so.
Okay, Mike, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, you have, there's a note within the alternatives, as I try and.
Well, let's.
No, but in order to understand what we're voting on to begin with, 50% and 100% of the additional potential reductions means, what is that? What is the, set of potential?
Okay.
That's what I'm missing.
All right. In the bottom left-hand corner, where I said final additional potential budget reductions, the local schools came up with $712K, and I said rejected. They didn't do that. The Silver Lake came up with $1.6 million, and they rejected that. So then, when I go to my FinCom Alternative 1 with 50% additional potential reductions, I'm taking 50% of what they rejected. So the $712K, I took 50% of that, 356, away from the local schools. You can see 14,569 versus 14,213. The Silver Lake, 553 is what would be coming to Kingston, so I'm only taking half of that away.
Okay.
The next column, FinCom Alternative 2,
It's just doubling it.
would be taking the full
Yep.
712, taking the full 553.
Understood, yep.
Okay?
And then you've got a suggested alternative that's somewhere in between the approved and alternative 1.
I threw that in there to have round numbers. 500K suggested budget reduction to the assessment, and 500K budget reduction to local schools.
Understood.
And I just want to make sure I understand this. Excess levy capacity. The way it stands right now, the excess levy capacity, which is actually a buffer of available revenue, correct me if I'm wrong, available revenue that can be utilized towards the budget without going for an override.
That's correct.
Okay. So right now, with the school at 10.3%, we have a buffer of $854,000. Looking at, and that's starting with a excess levy capacity of $2,527,000.
That was in the preliminary town budget.
Right.
Correct.
So now we're down to $854,000. So if this budget is accepted as is, because that's a difference of about $1.7 million, next year there will be an override. Because we needed $1.7 million this year of that buffer money to balance the budget.
Another way of looking at it is if the education budget came in next year without significant reductions.
Right.
We would probably be in trouble. If they came in with just their 3 to 4% annual, we would probably be looking at Proposition 2.5.
Right, because the buffer we would be going into next year with is $854,000. No more millions in that statement. We're down to thousands.
Yeah, if you want to look at it a different way, it's basically 2 out of every $3 in excess levy capacity disappears.
Right. Right.
Is anyone able to speak on what the impact is of the 8% increase? I'm not. What?
Well,
In other words, what would have to get cut to get to that number?
Right, has the school committee considered if they had to come to the 8%, what those cuts would mean?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Mark Guidaboni, Silver Lake School Committee. I'm one of your 4 representatives on the school committee. I certainly don't speak for them, nor do I speak for the Plimpton and Halifax contingents. But I will say that we have spent an exhausting meetings after meetings, and Carl has been at every one. So I told him tonight I would go through one of your meetings just to make up for some of that.
Which one's better?
He's got more time in than I could be here tonight. But Some of the factors, 69% of the money that we're dealing with is salaries and fixed items that I think Sarah has highlighted. And as they increase the salaries of the 3.5%, which is just the salary, doesn't get into the steps, doesn't get in all the other things that you've highlighted tonight, you've got a major increase already. And you're not going to be able to stay at 2.5% when your inflation rate's twice that. And I'm sorry, the math isn't going to work out for you. But we have, at Silver Lake, done everything. We've cut again. And we've cut to the point where we've had teachers and students at our meetings. We have had discussions going on in the classrooms on our budget cuts and what they mean and how they're going to affect things, which is already affecting your education for your students that are there. And it's unfortunate, but for the most part, I think being part of that civic process has been good for the students. We brought in the former business manager that preceded Sarah and paid her to go through everything all over again as a backup. We've had Gordon Law from Halifax spent time in the office during his work days looking and following up and looking for every possible way that we have missed something in this whole process of restructuring basically all the region. We had one anonymous member of, with students at Silver Lake, donate $3,000 cash to the cause at our last meeting as an example of the people that are vividly affected by this and how much they're passionate at trying to solve and find answers. I have never had, in my career of being on the school committee, had so many suggestions funneled through the union representatives at Silver Lake, emails coming to me personally. Would you consider this? Would you consider that? Would you consider starting teachers differently and restructuring this? Ideas that we've all come up with, we've revisited and tried our best to get the numbers down. So I'm here tonight, special education. Our new special ed director has come in and will go case by case and analyze each one of the special ed members and make sure that our students that need the services are getting those services, but also services that might not be categorized correctly are going to be defined so that they might be able to save a little bit of money. The transportation costs that Sarah identified tonight. We're trying to bring some of that transportation in-house. We're trying to organize and coordinate transportation within the entire region so that we don't have two vans picking up two kids that live next to each other, taking them to the same place. But right now, within all the system, the vice principals of each of all the schools in our district are the transportation coordinators. So if we can centralize our transportation needs and fill those vans up instead of having them run with one or two kids from town to town, I think we're going to be able to save a lot of money. So all of that is built into this budget. We've taken considerations. We've had professionals say, I think I can get to this number different than one we have, and I can get this budget item down, and those are the budget items you have in front of you tonight. So I would please encourage you, as Derek did at the end, to support this full budget going forward. We happen to have the first vote on this budget for Silver Lake on May 11th. If two towns in our district accept this budget and the third doesn't, we still have a Silver Lake budget. And Carl knows, amending us or recommending to our budget, we have to take those two towns to change that budget. But right now, it could be easily, with the increases that we see, Kingston's setting the largest increase. So we could have this budget handed to us by the other two towns. And this is not unusual. Halifax has voted not to support budgets before, and Kingston and Plimpton have supported them, and Halifax has had to ante up. So I think I understand where you're coming, and I certainly understand the fiscal cliff that Elaine highlighted, but I would like to strongly encourage you to support this budget tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And for those of us that aren't as familiar maybe as I am, when Mark talks about the two towns voting for it, that's the regional budget. So that if the two towns vote for the regional budget, he's correct. We're stuck with the numbers. we have the autonomy over our local budget. And one of the things that I think we always need to be careful about is that we don't want to, take all of the reduction against the local schools when we don't, to cover the problems that we get from the regional schools. You asked about the specific impacts. I tried to take pictures at one of these school committee meetings where this particular one is the $1.6 million of potential reductions at the Silver Lake Regional. They had about $550K of it, which would be no reductions in headcount. So that these reductions were such things as $11,000, reduced late bus by 1 day, having the late bus 2 days instead of 3 days, or 3 days instead of 4 days. Supplies cost, reducing supplies. Principal line, $7,500, I think that was some travel or something like that. Then the other half of it was, 3 or 4 full-time equivalents in various areas. So, and that's one of the reasons that I came up with what we just started to discuss here, of saying, hey, if my finance committee wanted to consider taking half of those reductions, probably no headcount reductions involved, and that's what those numbers would look like. But I think it's getting late, and I personally am ready to see where the committee wants to go with this. So I'm going to make a motion that the Finance Committee recommend approval of the Silver Lake assessment budget at $16,744,111, and the local schools at $14,568,740, which results in a bottom line budget increase, including schools going to town meeting at, depending how you look at it, the way I look at it, it's about 7.75%. So we'd be going to to town meeting with a bottom line of 7.75%, which is made up of 10.3% from the schools and 4.4% to the rest of the town, which is part of why I find that, I struggle with that how can we be supporting 10%? And if this was a one-time deal, I probably wouldn't have as much concern with it. But, it happened last year. I've been accused before by certain people in Kingston of always supporting the school budgets at the impact of hurting the other town budgets. So it's tough for me to, be sitting on this fence. But in any case, I've made the motion. If a yes to...
I can second it.
And I've got a second, so to make it clear, a yes to this motion is that we will support the school budgets as presented. We will be at excess levy capacity of $854K. We would be at a bottom line increase of about 7.75%. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Aye.
I'm gonna vote item 4.
Okay, let's start over again.
All right.
Where's our
All in
clickers?
favor of the motion?
Aye.
I'm gonna go aye.
Do I have 2 ayes or 3 ayes?
I can jump the gun on you the first time.
You have 2, it appears.
Okay, I guess I have 2 ayes. All opposed?
Nay.
Nay. 4 nays. Are we in agreement that 2 people wanted to support the school budgets as is, and 4 people want to say, sorry, we can't?
I mean, I'm not happy about it, but.
All I'm trying to get is an accurate
Oh, yeah, I'm not doing
vote.
jumping jacks over here.
Okay,
But-
okay. So now, the next item is, I am more than willing to have anybody else come up with any suggestions, but to get us started, what I have prepared for you is alternatives 1, 2, and 3. Alternative 1 would take half of the, what I call the school administration April reductions that were rejected. At the local schools, 712K was rejected. So that's 356K of suggested reductions that the Finance Committee would recommend. At the regional school level, the district level, 1,006,000 was rejected. I'm assuming that Kingston gets 55% of that, so 553K, and divided that by 2, so that I come up with a total suggested reduction of $633,000. 277 coming from the assessment from the regional, and 356 from the local school budget. Yes, Sarah?
I just want to clarify about the $1.6 million. Are you referring to, so the Silver Lake School Committee directed the administration to reduce the budget by $855,000, and the administration and principals put together in excess of that $855,000. So the $855,000 has been
Yes.
cut.
I'm referring to the 1,006,000 that was presented at your last
But
meeting.
that includes the 855.
Okay. That wasn't made clear to me. So you are only looking at a net of $160,000 at that meeting?
No, the principals put together cuts of the $855,000 and then prepared additional cuts should the school committee ask for them, and that's what was presented.
And that was the 1,006,000?
Yes. So
Okay.
the $1,006,000 minus the $855,000.
That was not the impression I got at that meeting. That I thought the 1,006,000 was all new dollars that were being looked at.
So the tier 1 cuts that were presented and the tier 2 cuts that were presented, the school committee then gave the principals the right to, or the privilege, I guess, to pick which they wanted to cut for that $855,000.
Okay.
All right, knowing that, I think what we have in front of us is just not tenable for the reasons that you explained about the difference earlier in what this would do to the local versus the Silver Lake assessment. So I'd like to reconsider our previous vote for the purpose of voting in favor of the plan as presented, because I no longer think we have a viable alternative.
Well, I'd like to suggest, can we vote the town budget and the school budget separate, so at least we can get something? And then, based on, it sounds like clarified information, that I just don't want to go 10.3. Can we have a meeting before Tuesday meeting, have it, or something, just talk about the school budget?
Certainly.
I mean, I see what the other board members mean, but I mean, at least to split the two budgets.
That's fine with me.
And what kind of a bottom line increase are we looking for?
Well, I mean,
You know, if we do a total of 633, it's an 8% increase. If we do 1,265,000, it's a 5.8% increase.
I don't think the $1,006,000, I don't think that 100% is a practical alternative. I think that's gonna cause enormous disruption at a rate that none of us are interested in.
and I throw on the table the town budget. I mean, it was agreed upon 3.5%. We're up over 5%. On January 9th, there was in our original packet, $300,000 worth of cuts to get us to the 3.5%, or 3%. So I mean, none of it's good, none of it's, I mean.
No,
No,
you're
it's
absolutely
not.
right, it's not, and I just struggle with maintaining level services I guess I'm going with the level services mandate, where we're trying to maintain level services across the town, and unfortunately, for education, that's a 10% increase.
And that's it, and I look at,
And it sucks, I mean.
right, and I said it at the last meeting.
Someone can bleep me, but yeah, it
You know,
sucks.
I look at
Yeah,
it
great.
globally. I mean, we can't even entertain the thought of new police officers or anything to the police budget, and that serves the whole town. You know, so there's a lot of global efforts here that aren't gonna get done with the school budget of 10.3. It's just,
I think it's a
Paul
unique
mentioned some-
situation
You mentioned
with
some,
the special eds
potential
and the
cuts that
immigrants.
didn't impact education.
So the principals, at the direction of the administration, put together 3 tiers of cuts. The first tier of cuts was all non-staff, it was cuts to supplies, equipment, professional development, athletics, just various supplies and materials and equipment. The second tier of cuts was to positions that would be retirements that would not be filled, or currently positions that are open that wouldn't be filled. So it wouldn't require pink slips. So from those, from the tier 1 and tier 2 cuts, the administration was able to make $855,000 without laying off staff. If there's anything over that $855,000, that's going to require staff members.
But that is still a decrease in the quality of the education, because you're not filling those positions. I mean,
I want to disagree with that. How do you know it's a,
if you're not filling educations, the student-to-teacher ratio is,
but we start with a budget that was approximately 15% over last year. And now we're reducing it to the point where it's 10% over last year. So I don't know that we can say for 100% that we're really hurting education.
well, I think if you look at it from even so I go by like a student-to-teacher ratio.
And there were statistics that the local school committee was provided.
Right, they were up last week, yeah.
Was provided that in most cases, we were going from 21 or 22 to 23 or 24.
The city of New York, which I would argue does not have a great education system, has a mandate of 20. So I would say we're already well above what is recommended.
Okay, I teach every day, and I teach classes in a wide array of sizes. I don't really agree. I think I fall somewhere in between the two of you. I think there are definitely monies that can be spent, that can be reduced without reducing the quality of education. I'm not sure I think the idea that a class of over 20 somehow provides an inherently substandard education is realistic. I also think just more generally that we have a problem, which is that with inflation where it is, particularly given the sorts of things that drive our budget, to say that we are gonna do level services at 3.5% is not tremendously realistic. And I
Right.
think some of the problem that we're having is some starting assumptions that maybe have not proven to be as tenable. And I'm not excited about this either, to be very, very clear, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure that all the things that we're trying to do are just, I don't think they can be harmonized.
I mean, what was Social Security's adjustment last year? 8.7% was their cost of living increase? I mean, this year it's only 3.5.
After many years of being much less than that.
I wouldn't know, I don't plan on taking it,
But
so.
that's a good point, though. I mean, we're talking about one element of our community, which is schools. We're not talking about any other element. And there are more needs for more people in the general population. Yes, schools is a factor in your home value and everything else, so is quality of life, so is being able to live in the town, so is public safety, the highway, roads, the whole big picture. And that's where, and it's good that FinCom is diverse. You have one perspective, and I'm on the other side of it and have a different perspective. And that's where we all come together, and at the end of the day, town meeting votes. But I just try to keep in mind more than just one segment of the community for a
Mr.
vote like this.
Guidoboni has another comment.
And just to add, that the impact has been felt. If you don't replace those staff members that are retiring, all the teachers now have higher classes.
Yep.
There are electives that are no longer going to be offered.
Yep.
We're going to have kids sitting in study halls that could be in electives and engaged. This is already an impact that's going to go throughout the system. And I just want you to understand, we're at that point where the deeper cuts are going to be permanent cuts that are going to be very hard to bring back and replace in every one of these kids' education days, because they don't get to repeat the 10th grade all over again. I understand, Elaine, where you're coming from. We as a community have a lot of hard decisions to make. And the programs that are offered at the school that better our community and keep our kids engaged in the afternoon, athletic programs, are good for an entire community, because those kids could be out getting in trouble somewhere else. And I think your police and will discuss that. But overall, the concept that I'd like to leave you with is that the schools have done their best to cut to where they're at, and the impact that you're going to present us trying to solve the problem any further is going to be very, very hard to recover from. Now, the structural changes that we took this year, I can't make any promises for next year, but I can't see that we are going to have anything but the standard increase of inflation like every other department next year, because we won't be facing this big restructure. I know it's the second year that it's been an increase for the schools, but I think overall, I think we should be able, if you can get us past this year, we should be able to come in with the appropriate budget next year that won't be this big impact. I can't make any promises, but that's what I've been told by people smarter than me on that school committee, so. Thanks.
Again,
Thanks.
I'd like to given what we've learned,
All right.
myself personally, I'd like to reconsider the previous
Does
vote.
anybody object to us reconsidering our motion concerning supporting the school budget as presented?
No.
No.
All right. One more time. I move that the Finance Committee recommend approval of the, I don't know where that piece of paper is. There it is. The Silver Lake assessment, $16,744,111. The local schools, $14,568,740.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm going to, let's do it individually. All in favor?
Derek, aye.
Michael, aye.
Debbie, aye.
All opposed?
Elaine, aye.
Carl, aye.
Jason, aye.
Okay, so we have a conundrum. We have 3-3.
Somebody call,
So I would suggest that this meeting is already an hour longer than I think that meeting should be. So I would suggest that we need to resolve this. Is it Tuesday night that we meet with the selectmen? Next week?
Yes.
Okay. I would suggest that we just discuss budgets and vote the school one next Tuesday night in our joint meeting with the selectmen.
We're going to vote after or before then?
What's that?
You're gonna
During the
vote-
meeting.
Oh,
During the
okay,
meeting.
during the meeting, all right.
Be ready for parents and teachers, because they'll be here.
I mean, and I don't blame them.
Yeah.
They should.
Jesse saying for 2 years. This is not new. Jesse stuff's not new. It's been here for 2 years. There's no, you guys have known for 2 years. This stuff out there.
Okay.
Would you like a motion, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, I think my other comment was how we were gonna handle this was assuming we were going to have a vote, a final vote. But hopefully, can everybody here make the meeting Tuesday night?
Yes.
Yes.
I will be remote, but I will be here.
Okay.
Well, you know what
I know what you mean, yes. All right, now, I'm not sure if David will be back or not.
We'll find him and track him down.
Yeah. All right, I'll take a motion.
I move the Finance Committee adjourn its meeting of Wednesday, April 17th at 8:57 PM.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?